The metallic screech pierced Marcus Chen's consciousness like a hot needle, yanking him from the depths of artificial sleep. His head throbbed with each pulse of the strange, bioluminescent patterns that rippled across the cell walls. The air itself felt wrong, too thick, too processed, carrying an alien scent that his brain couldn't quite categorize. Through the transparent barrier before him, three towering figures observed his awakening with clinical detachment. Their bodies were composed of overlapping crystalline segments that caught and refracted the ambient light, creating prismatic displays that would have been beautiful if they weren't so terrifying. Multiple sets of faceted eyes studied his every movement, each one shifting independently, like the carefully arranged lenses of some organic telescope. The Zx'tharii, as he would later learn they were called, communicated through subsonic vibrations that made his teeth ache and his bones hum. But their message somehow translated directly into his mind. Specimen appears adequately recovered from stasis. Combat potential assessment may proceed. Combat. The word triggered a cascade of memories from his military service. Marcus had spent 6 years as a combat medic with the 75th Ranger Regiment, patching up wounds under heavy fire, making split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. He'd traded that life for a quiet medical practice in Seattle, but the training, both physical and mental, had never left him. As the initial wave of panic subsided, Marcus's medical training kicked in. He conducted a quick self-assessment, no apparent injuries, all limbs functional, mild dehydration but nothing critical. His captors had even left his clothes intact, standard civilian attire that felt absurdly normal in this otherworldly setting. The cell itself revealed more through careful observation. The pulsing patterns weren't merely decorative, they followed regular sequences that suggested some kind of energy circulation system. The transparent barrier showed subtle distortions when the Zx'tharii moved closer, indicating a force field rather than physical material. Even the air circulation had a pattern to it, cycling every 47 seconds by his count. One of the crystalline beings shifted, its segments rearranging into a slightly different configuration. Specimen displays notable observational capabilities it transmitted. Previous data regarding human adaptive potential appears accurate. Marcus kept his breathing steady, his face neutral. Let them think he was just another confused specimen. Every detail he noticed was a potential advantage, every observation a possible key to survival. He'd learned in the Rangers that information could be as valuable as any weapon, and right now, information was all he had. Proceed with transfer to preparation chamber, the largest Zx'tharii commanded. As the force field began to shift, Marcus remained still, his muscles relaxed but ready. Whatever these beings had planned for him, they'd soon learn that humans were far more than simple test subjects. And Marcus Chen was far more than a simple human. The preparation chamber resembled an alien armory crossed with a museum of horrors. Weapons of every imaginable design lined the crystalline walls, plasma rifles that hummed with barely contained energy, vibroblades that could slice through molecular bonds, sonic disruptors that could turn organs to jelly. Each device bore the same biomechanical aesthetic as the Zx'tharii themselves, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Choose your implement of combat, the handler transmitted, its crystalline form shifting in what Marcus interpreted as anticipation. The arena awaits. Through the chamber's transparent ceiling, Marcus could see the massive coliseum stretching above. Tier upon tier of crystalline beings filled the stands, their faceted bodies creating a dazzling light show as they moved. The arena floor itself was a shifting landscape of platforms and obstacles, all formed from the same living crystal as everything else in this alien world. "I decline," Marcus stated firmly, keeping his voice steady despite the subsonic pressure building in his skull. The handler's segments rearranged in what might have been confusion. "Clarify. Combat specimens must be armed. This is protocol." Marcus thought back to his first day of combat training. Sergeant Rivera's voice echoing across the years, "Your best weapon isn't the gun in your hands or the knife on your belt. It's the 3 pounds of gray matter between your ears. Everything else is just a tool." "I said I decline," Marcus repeated. "If I'm to fight, I'll do it my way." A ripple of what could only be described as laughter-sharp, crystalline vibrations that set his teeth on edge spread through the gathering crowd of handlers and observers. "Human specimen shows signs of mental deficiency," one transmitted. Perhaps damage occurred during stasis. Through the chamber's walls, Marcus could see other combatants being prepared. A six-limbed creature whose skin rippled like liquid mercury was testing the balance of a particle sword. A being that seemed to be made entirely of living smoke was being fitted with some kind of containment armor studded with weapon ports. In another chamber, something that looked like a sentient mass of vine-like appendages was having molecular edges grafted directly onto its tendrils. The memories came unbidden of firefight in Kandahar, running out of ammunition with still more wounded to evacuate. He'd used his medical knowledge instead pressure points, nerve clusters, the body's natural weaknesses. Sometimes knowing how to heal something meant knowing exactly how to disable it too. Previous specimens who refused armament survived an average of 47 seconds. A new handler transmitted, its tone carrying what might have been concern. Your species data set is insufficient for accurate predictions, but extinction seems the most probable outcome. Marcus studied the strange architecture of the arena above. The crystalline platforms weren't randomly placed, they followed patterns, just like the energy pulses in his cell. The other fighters were impressive, but they all relied heavily on their weapons. They moved like soldiers who had forgotten that their bodies themselves could be weapons, who had never learned that sometimes the best defense was understanding rather than attacking. "Then I'll be adding some interesting data to your set," Marcus replied, rolling his shoulders to work out the last of the stasis stiffness. "When do we begin?" The handlers vibrated in collective confusion. Their crystalline bodies synchronized momentarily, creating a cascade of rainbow refractions. "Combat begins in 3-time units," they finally transmitted. "Your decision is recorded. May your extinction be instructive." As they led him toward the arena's entry chamber, Marcus focused on his breathing, falling into the familiar pre-combat routine. He cataloged everything he'd observed: the way the crystal platforms shifted in regular patterns, how the Zx'tharii's bodies telegraphed their intentions through subtle refractions, the slight delay between thought and movement in the weaponized fighters. In the distance, something that sounded like a cross between a gong and a gravitational wave announced the approaching combat. The crowd's crystalline chatter intensified, their bodies creating a kaleidoscope of anticipatory light. Marcus squared his shoulders and allowed himself a small smile. These aliens had chosen him as a specimen, expecting just another brief spectacle of violence. Instead, they were about to learn an important lesson about humanity. Sometimes the most dangerous weapon wasn't a tool you could hold in your hands, but the power of an adaptable mind and an unbreakable will. Through the rising vibrations of the crowd, Marcus heard the entry chamber beginning to open. The first fight was moments away. He'd survived firefights and ambushes, saved lives under impossible conditions, and learned that sometimes the greatest strength lay in knowing when not to fight at all. Now he would put all of that knowledge to the ultimate test. "Let's give them a show they'll never forget," he whispered to himself as the chamber doors began to part, revealing the glittering arena beyond. The first opponent was clearly meant to test him, a chitinous creature wielding sonic pulse blades. Marcus recognized the handler's strategy: start with something familiar enough to Earth's insects that a human might instinctively fear it. But fear was a luxury he couldn't afford. As the creature charged, Marcus watched its gait, noting how its weight shifted between its 4 legs. The pulse blades hummed through the air, but he was already moving, stepping just outside their range. The crystalline platform beneath them shifted, and Marcus used the momentum to enhance his dodge, letting the creature's own speed carry it past him. Specimen shows unexpected mobility. The handler's transmission rippled through his mind. Adjust combat parameters. His second opponent was the smoke being he'd observed earlier, its containment armor bristling with energy weapons. But Marcus had noticed something during his wait in the preparation chamber. The armor's joints followed standard mechanical principles. As plasma bolts seared the air around him, he maneuvered between the arena's shifting platforms, timing his movements to the pattern he'd memorized. The smoke being's ammunition wasn't infinite. Each shot depleted its energy reserves. When it paused to recharge, Marcus struck at the armor's knee joint, using a precision strike that would have disabled a human opponent. The alien technology, for all its advancement, succumbed to the same basic laws of physics. The unarmed one survives. Again, the crowd's collective vibration carried a mix of confusion and growing interest. Previous combat paradigms appear insufficient. They sent 3 opponents next, a violation of their own protocols, Marcus noted. The vine creature with its molecular edges, a hovering sphere that emitted waves of destructive energy, and something that seemed to bend light around itself. Each was deadly, each was heavily armed, and each relied too heavily on their weapons. Marcus let them come. He'd treated enough combat injuries to know exactly how different species moved, how their anatomies worked. The vine creature's molecular edges were devastating but required direct contact. The sphere's energy waves followed predictable patterns. The lightbender's invisibility wasn't perfect. The arena's crystalline surfaces revealed subtle distortions. He moved like water between them, turning their attacks against each other. The vine creature's edges sliced through the sphere's energy emitters. The lightbender's stealth field shorted out under friendly fire. Within minutes, all three lay disabled but largely unharmed. Impossible, the handlers transmitted. Combat efficiency exceeds all projected models. As Marcus stood catching his breath, he noticed the crystal fragments scattered across the arena floor had begun arranging themselves into familiar patterns. The entire structure was learning, adapting, just like him. "Send your next challenger," he called out, his voice steady despite the exertion. "I'm starting to understand how things work around here." The crowd's crystalline chatter took on a new tone, something between excitement and unease. They had expected a brief spectacle of violence, a primitive creature fighting and failing against superior technology. Instead, they were witnessing something unprecedented, a human turning their own arena into a weapon, using their precisely ordered world against their champions. Next combat phase initiated, the handlers announced. Introducing elite tier adversary. The arena floor began to restructure itself, platforms rising and falling in more complex patterns. Through the shifting crystal maze, Marcus caught glimpses of something massive approaching, something that made even the Zx'tharii in the crowd pulse with anticipation. He rolled his shoulders, mind already racing through possible strategies. They were escalating the challenge, hoping to end his surprising run of victories. But with each fight, he learned more about their technology, their tactics, their ways of thinking. They didn't realize that every attempt to defeat him only made him more dangerous. "Let's see what else I can learn," Marcus murmured, as his new opponent emerged from the crystal mist, and the arena erupted in anticipatory light. Kraz'thor filled the arena like a walking apocalypse. 3 times Marcus's height, its body was a masterwork of cybernetic enhancement and crystalline evolution. Each movement sent cascades of light through its transparent segments, revealing complex internal systems that Marcus's medical mind immediately began analyzing. The human specimen faces Kraz'thor, undefeated champion of 17 cycles. The announcement reverberated through the stadium. Previous encounter duration record 38 seconds. Marcus noticed how the creature's crystalline structure pulsed in sync with its movement circulation system. He realized every living thing needed to move resources through its body. Even here, basic medical principles held true. Kraz'thor charged without warning, faster than anything its size should be capable of moving. Marcus barely rolled aside as a crystalline fist shattered the platform where he'd stood. The impact sent shockwaves through the arena's structure, but within those vibrations, Marcus detected a pattern. "Your species' persistence is admirable," Kraz'thor's transmission boomed in his mind. But futile, each word was accompanied by a subtle shift in the champion's internal lighting, a tell, like a human's micro-expressions. Marcus weaved through a barrage of attacks, each dodge bringing him closer to understanding. The champion's enhanced strength came at a cost. Microscopic stress fractures appeared in its crystalline structure with each explosive movement. A doctor's trained eye could spot the weakness in even the most impressive anatomy. Then Kraz'thor landed a glancing blow. Pain exploded across Marcus's ribs as he was sent flying into a crystal spire. His vision blurred, lungs struggling for air. Through the haze, he saw the champion advancing, its internal systems glowing with triumphant energy. That's when he saw the flaw in the design. Every enhancement, every weapon system, all powered by a central crystal matrix. Like a heart, pumping energy instead of blood. And like any heart, it had to maintain a specific rhythm. Marcus forced himself to his feet, tasting blood. "You fought hundreds of armed opponents," he gasped. But how many truly understood what they were seeing? He began to move differently now, each step precise. The arena's crystalline platform sang with resonant frequencies as he led Kraz'thor through an intricate dance. The champion's attacks grew stronger, but Marcus wasn't dodging anymore, he was conducting. "Your defeat will be legendary," Kraz'thor transmitted, launching a devastating combination of strikes. but Marcus had already mapped every weak point, every stress fracture, every resonant frequency. With perfect timing, he sidestepped the final attack. The champion's fist struck a crystal platform at exactly the right angle, sending a harmonic wave through its structural matrix. The vibration matched the frequency of Kraz'thor's power system, and for one crucial moment, the rhythm faltered. Crystal segments crackled with discordant energy. Emergency systems tried to compensate, but the cascade had begun. Marcus watched with a doctor's detachment as the champion's enhanced body began to lock up, its perfect symmetry corrupted by competing frequencies. Kraz'thor fell to its knees, internal light dimming. How the transmission was weak now. No weapon. "I am a healer," Marcus replied quietly. "I don't need weapons to understand how things break." The arena fell silent as Kraz'thor's systems shut down, the mighty champion disabled by precisely applied knowledge rather than brute force. In the stands, the crystalline audience vibrated with a new frequency, one that felt remarkably like awe. The arena's crystalline structure pulsed with unprecedented patterns as 5 elite warriors materialized in a perfect pentagon around Marcus. Each represented a different conquered species, each armed with technology that could end him in seconds. The Zx'tharii were done testing. This was meant to be his execution. "Your victory over Kraz'thor was impressive," the handlers transmitted, "but ultimately irrelevant. Prove your species' worth or face extinction." Marcus stood quietly, analyzing each opponent. A quantum phase warrior whose body existed in multiple states simultaneously. A temporal manipulator trailing chronometric distortions. A hive mind collective of microscopic killing machines. A gravity bender. And a psychic bombardier whose thoughts alone could shred consciousness. Before we begin, Marcus projected his voice clearly. "I want you all to notice something about this arena." The warriors paused, their attack formations momentarily disrupted by curiosity. Marcus smiled. The first step in any treatment was getting the patient's attention. Every crystal, every platform, every energy pulse, it's all connected. One vast system, learning and adapting. Just like the neural networks in a human brain, he tapped his foot, sending ripples of resonance through the floor. "And I've had plenty of time to learn its patterns." The quantum warrior struck first, existing in 12 places at once. But Marcus had already calculated the probability paths, using the arena's crystalline surfaces as mirrors to track the quantum signatures. He moved through the overlapping attacks like water through stones. The temporal manipulator tried to trap him in a time loop, but Marcus had noticed how the chrono distortions interfered with the arena's natural frequencies. A precisely timed jump between platforms shattered the temporal field, sending feedback through the warrior systems. "Humans aren't special because we're strong," Marcus called out as he wove between the hive mind swarm attacks. "We're special because we learn, we adapt, we understand." The gravity bender tried to crush him, but Marcus had already mapped the crystalline stress points throughout the arena. He let himself be pulled down, knowing exactly how the force would redistribute through the living crystal. The backlash sent the gravity bender floating helplessly toward the ceiling. The psychic bombardier launched a mental assault that would have liquefied a normal mind. But Marcus had spent years in trauma wards, learning to compartmentalize horror and pain. He reflected the psychic energy through the arena's crystal matrix, turning the entire structure into one massive consciousness-refracting prism. "We don't need superior weapons," he continued, his voice steady despite the exertion. "We have something better, the ability to see patterns, to understand systems, to turn knowledge into power." One by one, the elite warriors fell not through violence, but through precise application of everything Marcus had learned about their weaknesses, their technologies, and the arena itself. He disabled their weapons, disrupted their systems, and rendered them harmless without causing permanent damage. As the last opponent collapsed, Marcus turned to face the Zx'tharii observers. "You wanted to test humanity's worth? Here it is. I could have killed them all. I knew exactly how, but I chose not to, because true strength isn't about destruction, it's about understanding." The arena hummed with a new frequency as the Zx'tharii absorbed his words. Their crystalline bodies synchronized, creating a cascade of light that transformed the entire Colosseum into a spectacular display of refracted consciousness. "Assessment complete," the handlers transmitted. "Human potential exceeds all projected parameters. Species categorization exceptional. Marcus stood tall among his fallen opponents, his breathing steady, his mind clear. He had faced the ultimate test not with weapons or violence, but with intelligence, observation, and the compassionate choice to subdue rather than destroy. The arena's crystal structure pulsed one final time, acknowledging the profound truth it had witnessed. Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating an enemy, but from transforming them into something more than they were before. The Zx'tharii High Council chamber sparkled with newfound recognition as they presented Marcus with their highest honor, a crystal shard that pulsed in harmony with his heartbeat. Their civilization, built on the premise of superior weaponry and technological dominance, had been transformed by the simple truth he had demonstrated in the arena. Your species has taught us that true power lies not in the weapons we wield, but in the choices we make, the Council Elder transmitted. You are free to return to Earth, Marcus Chen, as an ambassador between our peoples. The crystalline ships that had once abducted him now carried him home with an honor guard, their designs already evolving to reflect the lessons learned about cooperation rather than conquest. As Earth's familiar blue sphere grew larger in the viewing portal, Marcus reflected on how his experience would change both societies. He had entered their arena as a specimen and emerged as a teacher. His victory wasn't just personal, it represented humanity's potential to transform violence into understanding, to turn combat into connection. The Zx'tharii would never again underestimate the power of an unarmed human with a trained mind and compassionate heart. Back in his Seattle apartment, Marcus placed the crystal shard on his desk, its gentle pulse a reminder of everything he had learned. When he looked up at the stars now, he saw more than distant lights. He saw the possibility of bridges built through intelligence rather than intimidation. Sometimes, he whispered to the night sky, the strongest weapon is knowing when not to use one at all. The crystal pulsed in agreement, sending rainbow patterns dancing across his walls, a reminder that true power wasn't about domination, but about the wisdom to understand, the courage to show mercy, and the strength to choose peace.